Bold. That's truly the first word that comes to mind when I think about Hong Kong-based Audra Gordon. I mean, you have to be to take your banking career to Asia after reaching out to a complete stranger on LinkedIn, or to decide to do an overland travel trip across West Africa with a rough idea of where you could go depending on your personal network, or to leave your comfy banking job, go to grad school, launch a fashion brand, and then maintain it during a pandemic with all its challenges. You definitely have to be a bit bold and audacious, and that just might describe Audra to a T. Her early years were spent in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where she was raised before she joined her parents in New York, where they had already immigrated. And her career would take her to Europe, Africa, and Asia. But as you listen to her story unfold, you'll hear the impact about how those early years, especially living in the Caribbean with her grandmother, would influence Being Bold, her fashion brand. You will hear how a trip to Morocco would begin a love affair with the African continent and be a key part of her business's social mission, which has a focus on both sustainability and size inclusion. But you'll also hear the story of a woman who is wholly inquisitive and unafraid to pursue the interests and things she values. Audra's strength is in her ability to connect with people and cultures. She has an exciting aura that is warm, bright, and effortless, much like the clothing she designs. Audra definitely radiates, and that becomes quite evident early on in this episode of The Global Chatter. So I'm here with Audra Gordon, who so kindly is joining in from her part of the world. And if you guys are listening to this, we were just joking off air about how it's really early because I'm in the United States, and I'm gonna let her tell you where she is right now. But Audra, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you who probably haven't read the show notes yet, she is based in Hong Kong. But before we even get to how she got to Hong Kong, I'm excited for her to tell a little bit about her story. And so, Audra, I asked this question of everyone who comes on. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how you grew up.
Absolutely. So I was born in the Caribbean islands of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I grew up there, and then I moved to New York when I was 13. So spent most of my formidable years in Brooklyn, New York. And then in 2011, I moved to Hong Kong and had a short stint in London and short stint in Ghana, and traveled quite a bit around the African continent as well, but found my way back to Hong Kong, and I've been here for the last 10 years.
So and I've talked to you before, I didn't realize that you were in the Caribbean until you were a preteen. So yeah, tell me about that experience. What was your childhood like, and how did it really change when you moved to the US?
Yeah, so I grew up with my grandmother and my aunts. My parents had migrated to the US when I was 5 and 6. So one moved a year after that. My mom moved first, and then my grandmother and my aunts raised us. And I remember back then, looking at the planes and, thinking about reconnecting with my mom. Like when I see like the planes that will, travel overhead, that was my connection with travel. Like I felt like reconnecting with my parents was that thing because I hadn't seen them for 5 years until I came to the US on holiday when I was 10. And then moved when I was 13. So, growing up in the Caribbean, we lived right next to the beach. So, it was just fun. I have, 2 sisters and a cousin. So the 4 of us grew up together, just, having a normal childhood in the Caribbean. But my parents were in New York at that time.
Very cool. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think that's kind of a common story, not just for kids from the Caribbean, but I know many people know that I grew up in sub-Saharan Africa. And so that was common as well, is that parents or guardians would get an opportunity somewhere. And then, of course, immigration process and everything else. There's a delay. Wow. Okay. So then you moved to the US at 13. And I swear, I asked this of all third culture kids, right? So kids who've grown up in more than one culture. Like, what was the shift for you? And I know you'd visited the States, obviously, but what was the shift from going... I mean, you were in the islands, correct, beach culture, warmth, all all predominantly Black and brown folks, right? What was it
Mhm.
like then moving to Brooklyn?
Yeah, so Brooklyn was interesting because when I first moved to Brooklyn, I was in Flatbush. So, it's a little Caribbean. So we were in a Caribbean
Mhm.
neighborhood. And so we got to connect with, other kids from the Caribbean as well, like, going to school, with mostly Caribbean kids. So, but it was definitely different, like, growing up in the Caribbean and, just being in part of the community. Like now you're in this big world in the US and you felt like a bit alone. You had to kind of adjust to the culture, and even school was totally different than back home. So it was quite a bit of a shift, but I felt a bit isolated initially because I felt like
Mhm.
it was just a different world that I was used to, and I had to get adjusted to life in the US initially. But eventually I felt like it was definitely home in Brooklyn because I had so many Caribbean people, the food, the parties, just the Caribbean culture was definitely infused in Brooklyn, in Flatbush, where I started off.
So I kind of have two follow-up questions with that. Obviously, you came over. Were you still going back and forth to the Caribbean? Were you able to still go visit family, or that just
No.
sort of stopped?
No, initially when we moved in 20 in well, we moved in 93. I only went back I think once or twice, in my early stages. Like we traveled to Toronto, so I think we went to Canada twice because we had family there. But in terms of going back to the Caribbean, we didn't really go back often. I think in my teenage years, I remember going back twice, and then I went back obviously as an adult. But yeah, we definitely didn't go back at all. Yeah.
And then even within, of course, growing up in New York, then I'm obviously Caribbean is an expansive
Mhm.
term.
Yes.
Were there other families like, so I wonder, because within that can include, of course, like Bahamians, it can
Mhm.
include Antiguans, Trini folks.
Yep.
And so I'm curious, were you still able to find folks from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or was it, okay, we're all, it's like we're all regionally
Right.
from somewhere, and that was the community. And I'm not saying that there are differences, right? Because these are very
Right.
different countries,
Absolutely.
but yeah.
My earlier friends, like friends who I went, well, I when I arrived in the US, I was in the eighth grade, and then I went into high school. So some of my friends I've had from high school are still my friends to this day, and quite a few of them are from Trinidad, Guyana. I had a friend from St. Vincent later on in life, and some friends who I knew back home who had also migrated to the US. But yeah, my friends were from so many different islands, and we just met at school and we connected, and we went to different
Mhm.
parties, and we just did different things together. But yeah, there were definitely a diverse group of friends from a lot of the different islands. Yeah.
So, the question I always find is that, all right, you've grown up in this community, diverse community, and then the time comes typically where people figure out, all right, I'm 18. What am I
Mhm.
going to do with my
Right.
life, right? And as someone who spends most of her days working with people trying to figure out that question, what did you decide to do at 18? Did you go to college? Did
Right.
you decide to travel? What was your
No.
plan?
So I started working when I was 16 years old. I started working in retail. So I worked for a few clothing brands like Ken of Cole, Express, Our Pastel. So that's what I did. Like, while I was studying, I also worked simultaneously. So I had an interest in fashion since then. My grandmother was a seamstress. So I grew up in the Caribbean with her sewing for the entire community. So I love fashion. I love clothing. And that's initially where my interest was. But then, everyone makes you feel like this is not a real career. You need to do something
Mm,
serious, right? You need to be a banker,
mhm.
lawyer, doctor. Like fashion is not a real career. Like you do
You
not go to
sound like
school and do
you sound
that.
like every immigrant family parent, right? It's like lawyer.
Absolutely.
Everyone that comes on here is like lawyer, engineer, doctor, maybe an accountant, something in finance.
Yes,
That's it, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I also think we just had limited exposure to careers in fashion, right? And again, the
Hmm.
arts weren't, I think now more so you have a bit more support around the arts, but back then, definitely, like you need to do something serious. Like this is a joke.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's what made me decide. I studied business management and finance in my undergrad. And I started off as a teller in banking and worked my way up to VP
Mm.
level within a few years in banking, while still working in fashion and on the weekends. Like I still work for a few clothing stores on the weekends while I was in banking full time. So it was quite interesting, making the switch. But
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. And so, wow. And I know that that's part of the reason that took you to Hong Kong, right, is because you obviously, and anyone who knows anything about sort of business and on an international scale and looks at that part of the world, that's a hub, right?
Absolutely.
Is that what kind of led to you though being able to going to Hong Kong? Were you just working up in your career and the opportunity came, or were you working and you thought to yourself, I want to kind of step out of being in New York? And I know that there's some stops in the way. What was the thing that kind of led you kind of leaving the US to continue with your career?
Okay, so I began traveling globally, and I was working for an international bank. We were in 86
Mhm.
countries. I had clients everywhere, so I became a proper nomad. From an early age, like my early 20s, I started traveling quite a bit. Like every December, I'll take a month off because most of my clients were away. I'll travel, with Europe, South America. I just started traveling a lot of the Caribbean islands as well. And then I thought, it was time for me to have an international career. I thought London would be, a good next step because the bank's headquarters were in London. And I thought, okay, there's no language barrier. I never considered Hong Kong. And then I reached out to this guy on LinkedIn. He was a Black American working in Hong Kong. And I saw his profile. We had also done the same, management training program. We had a lot of colleagues in common, but we had never met each other in person. And I sent him a message on LinkedIn and I said, I would love to chat with you about how you transitioned from HSBC New York to Hong Kong. And he said, you're in luck. I'm in New York for 2 weeks. Let's meet up. And we didn't have a chance to meet in person, but we chatted on the phone and all the preconceived notions about language, culture. He said, you'll be totally fine. Everyone speak English. And I felt like, if he's a Black American in Hong Kong and he's done it, I can do it too, right? So that inspired me. I went online and I saw a role to lead the international team, to manage the international team in the head office here. And I applied for the job, had one phone interview, and I was offered the opportunity to move to Hong Kong.
So. See, I feel like you are, so this is really funny. I feel like you are a walking advertisement for LinkedIn.
Yes.
So yesterday I was on Twitter, which has nothing to do with anything, but I was on Twitter and people, like, some folks were complaining about how LinkedIn isn't necessarily useful.
Right.
And as someone who uses it quite a bit, I'm like, it can if you know how to use it, but it's like social media. It's not for everyone. But the fact that you actually did the thing
yes.
that I tell clients to do, which is actually reach out to people and have a conversation, like forget all the other noise, is really funny.
I reached out to random strangers daily. This is what I do. This is my thing.
Like, too. And here's the thing, and this is not, I'm not poo-pooing on anyone who doesn't want to use LinkedIn. I mean, it's the same thing you do on Twitter. It's the same thing on how we got connected on Instagram. Right. It's just find the social medium to network. And I think you said something really, really important, is the fact that you saw someone who, I mean, obviously you didn't know this man, but you saw that his training, and also as a Black man, right, was in a space where maybe you could be in and actually reached out. Because I think for many of us, and I think this is for a lot of people, if you don't see people who are in kind of share your identities, you don't really know if you could do something, but you were just like, yeah, I'm just going to reach out to him. So I think that's wise. You mentioned the travel, and I know that you are an extensive traveler, that you've been to probably, I guess at this point, almost 80 countries. Now, early on, obviously, you said as a family, you didn't necessarily go back to the Caribbean, but you did do, like, you traveled to Canada, which is international. It doesn't matter. That's on the other side of New York.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Toronto, it's international. You need a passport and or ID or something.
Absolutely.
What was it that really piqued your interest in travel? Because I know that that's a common thread through kind of everything we're talking about. Where was that point where you were like, I want to see the world, and what kind of led you to sort of making all these journeys?
Right. So I just love, experiencing different culture. I'm a connector. I'm a people person. So just traveling to, new places and getting an opportunity to speak to people, understanding their journey, that was something that I found fulfilling. So as I started traveling and having these experiences, I realized, I really enjoy this. I now started mapping out, where else in the world I would like to go. And then I definitely think, working for an international bank that was in so many countries, even clients who I didn't meet in person, like I had conversations with them and I built relationships with them. So even like when I went to South America, I met with one of my clients. He was a British guy who was living in Argentina, set up a tango school. And again, so I had never met him in person, but he embraced me and said, oh, I said, I'm coming to Argentina. He said, oh, let's meet up. And he took me around. So again, I felt a bit comfortable. Like I did a lot of solo travel, but I felt comfortable having contacts or even, people, like I said, I haven't met, but at least I had some sort of contacts or people who had been to these countries. And, so that inspired me. Like I was looking at one of my clients who, when I was talking about my first trip to Africa was to Morocco. And one of my clients, obviously working in banking, clients had to, notify us of where they're traveling, so just so that cards don't get blocked and all of that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember one particular client, she was retired and she traveled a lot. And every time she's leaving, she will come and she'll write a note of all the countries she's going to. And one of the places she had gone to was Morocco. And her experience there inspired me to start traveling on the continent. And then, like I said, the rest was history. I really enjoy the people, just getting immersed in the culture. I just truly enjoy, exploring. So.
So two really good things coming out of that. The first that I'm curious is, obviously, as a banker, you got to connect with all these people in different cross-cultural spaces. What was that like just as a Black woman in international banking, right? In the role that you were in?
Yes.
And the clientele, how was that professionally?
Right. So I manage high net worth clients initially in New York, and then I led the team in Hong Kong. So these were high net worth clients who traveled, globally and shared their experiences with me. Right. So these conversations, you build those relationships and you share their journey about where they're from, whether they had become expats as well in the US. Because where I was in Manhattan in the meatpacking district, like I had, Google, we had a lot of the fashion, companies were right in, in the area. And, so I got to meet so many expats and learn about their journey and, their, experience moving to the US or their travels. And that really inspired me. And I think that definitely, helped in terms of, giving me a bit more conviction that this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, and I gathered, especially with the conversations you were having with clients, that I was like, okay, she's probably working with more higher net worth. Not that you couldn't with middle income or lower, you know what I mean? But I mean, if they're regularly traveling, we know
Absolutely.
that there is a financial commitment to that for those of us who traveled, right?
Yes.
And if they're talking to their banker, I mean, I was just laughing to myself because as someone who every other moment my cards would stop working in places and I'm just like calling. I'm like, I told y'all I was going to be in what you I get it. But I think that that's really interesting exposure that you got in terms of being able to tie sort of that growing interest in travel and really having a career internationally, right? Because once again, I don't think we don't get taught that unless we're around someone who's
done it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so you mentioned at Morocco. I know Morocco was the first place you went to the continent. And, when we say the continent here, we're like Africa.
Yes.
I mean, other people might be like Europe. No. But if I say the continent, we're talking about Africa. But, but I know that trip, it seems, just sort of started your, I don't want to call it a love affair, but really your commitment and your intentionality to that space. And so Morocco is the first place you decided to go. What was your experiences in Morocco and how did that lead to other experiences in Africa?
Right. So Morocco, as I mentioned, I visited Morocco in spring of 2010. And that was a totally different experience than the rest of my travels across the continent. Now I've done 26 countries in Africa, so almost half of the continent. And I am obsessed. I can say that. I'm truly obsessed with the continent. I am in love with it. I'm passionate about the continent. And so that first trip was a bit different in that I joined an organized tour. And I convinced one of my girlfriends. I said, "Oh, I really want to go to Morocco. Would you join me?" Because at that point, your perception of Africa is, "Oh, I didn't want to go by myself. I would love a friend to join me." And it became this luxury experience. One, I guess we had some sort of upgrade because of the currency difference or something like that, which we weren't expecting. So we stayed at like five-star hotels. We had these experiences going between like a few cities in Morocco. And again, we were a bit removed from the local community. And that was a different experience for me versus the rest of my travels across the continent, right? So I love Morocco. It was a beautiful country. I got lost in the markets there, lots of colorful, fabric and all these different things that you were able to bring back. So I really love Morocco. And one of the highlights for that trip, I met a guy on the plane and he took us around. So we left the group and then we joined this guy who was sitting next to me on the plane. And, he definitely showed me his city. We did a tour on the water, the different things that were part of the trip. And that was exciting for me. And that's one of the points where I realized like having an immersive experience with a local, I think I will enjoy more than this isolation of just being with other tourists and just having this luxury experience. And I realized when I returned to the continent that I wanted to have a totally different experience. So when I came back in 2012, I did 6 weeks in East Africa from Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa. And that I did an overland truck. So I'd met someone in Hong Kong who told me about overlanding in Africa because I'd never heard of it. And there are these trucks that, you join, lots of people from around the world. You can hop on, hop off at different spots. Some places you sleep in tents. If you wanted a more luxury experience, yeah.
I know what overlanding is.
Yes.
Okay, so let me not interrupt your wonderful story, but let me just say, you said tent. Anybody who knows me, okay, and I have a friend who's probably dying right now. Anyone who knows me, let's talk about camping for a very small second. I hate camping. Now, this is why this is entertaining. I have been a camp counselor.
Really?
And I have camped on 3 continents. I have more camping equipment than you think I should have. I've got a tent currently in the Middle East right now I need to go get. And I have a sleeping bag. I have all the equipment. I hate camping. So when you said a tent,
yes.
Oh my God. I have done it and I've told folks, they're like, "Oh, Amanda, you haven't done the right spot." I'm like, no. I've done it in Africa, Asia, and North America. I don't like camping.
Really? I love it. Love.
Girl, no, you said a tent. Nope. Because my philosophy is so bad. Let me tell you, I swear, I say this all the time. I said, I am first generation American.
Right.
I'm very fully aware of the villages my family comes from. Right. They did not immigrate for me to camp. So I do not camp. I'm not mad if you camp. You should totally do you. But as for me and myself, if there's not an RV involved, or a cabin, am not part of this. Anyway, continue with your lovely overland story. I just wanted to say that part.
No, I truly enjoyed it. Like even camping in Tanzania outside of Serengeti, like at night we're hearing all of the animals and stuff. And everybody's
I don't want to hear that. Because I watch National Geographic and I know I have been on a safari. Look, I have seen things run and I do not want it to be the thing that they're running towards. But anyway, yes, beautiful Serengeti. Carry on.
So I spent 6 weeks. Actually, I wasn't even supposed to be there for 6 weeks. I ended up missing my flight in South Africa. I made up all types of holidays. I told my boss, I said, "Listen, there's some volunteer leave I think I qualify for." I was making up all sort of leave to put together to make sure I had a long holiday. So that trip really, like I said, it was a totally different experience from that Morocco experience, right? And that's when that's when I felt like these are my people. I need to be here, right? So
you touch on something, which is another thing that this interview is not about me, but yet you said something like, "Oh, I'm there with her." So I think I had a conversation with some previous guests. I'm thinking Rashida of Sheeta on the Loose, and I remember saying, "Man, I don't think I can do group travel." Like I've done group travel before. And I I don't like it,
Right.
but but well, let me not say I don't like it. I think the older I get, the more I just, and I've done a lot of solo travel. You know, I've said this on the show before. Your equivalent of East Africa, so all those countries you did, my
Mhm.
equivalent solo was like Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, but a lot of,
Right.
you know, those are big countries, right?
Right.
Except for
Right.
really Uruguay.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is hard, I think, to be on a trip on a trip with folks,
Uh-huh.
right? Especially like, no, because I can imagine, right? So traveling with someone like you who really likes an immersive experience, right?
Right.
If
Mm-hmm.
I'm someone who really wants the full-on luxury resort
Right.
experience,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's hard to kind of meet in the middle. And
Yes.
so, but I can also appreciate it is nice to have the luxury experience that some, because sometimes I don't know if you've ever had this experience.
Right.
Have you ever like traveled, and I've
Mm-hmm.
done this, where you've traveled hardcore by yourself and then one day you're just like, I do want like all the
Mm-hmm.
comforts,
Right.
just
Of having,
stick me
yeah.
in a really nice hotel and like room service. I don't know if you've done, because that's happened to me where I've traveled and been like, okay, I need a day to recuperate, let me go to this really nice
Right.
hotel.
Right. No, but you know, the funny thing is, most of my travels across Africa, like I stayed with local families. I realized,
Nice.
again, I can stay, you know, at a luxury hotel by myself, but I think the experience of experiencing a country from a local's perspective, I
Mm,
think that's like fulfilling for me. And so that's why I never like during this entire journey, like I said, I did 6 months and I traveled West Africa by road solo. And that was life changing, like life
mm,
changing, where I took
right.
buses, I took taxis, I took motorbike with my suitcase on the back, you know, going from one country to the next. And that was life changing. But every step along the way, I stayed with local families. I knew I had a large network in Africa, but I didn't realize how vast it was until I got there. And every single country I had a place to stay, you know? So it was, yeah.
So I know. So well, here's what I'm curious with West Africa, right?
Right,
So like, how far across did you go? Like,
right.
where did you go? And then how did you? Obviously, you had a network, but
Mhm.
were there places where you didn't have as strong a network, or how did you connect to be able to say, all right, hey, I'm going to be in Dakar this week. Can I stay with you?
Right. So like I said, I'm a connector. I keep in touch with people, and not because I'm coming to your country. I literally reach out to my friends. I feel like I get, especially on the weekends, touch base with my friends. I just all around the world, right? So even on the continent, I started thinking, okay, I'm traveling through West Africa. Ghana had been a hub for me for a long time, so I have lots of friends in
Mhm.
Ghana. So that was my base for the 6 month trip, right? So I arrived there, went to Togo by road, you know, over Christmas, came back to Ghana for
Mhm.
New Year's, then went west, you know, to Cote d'Ivoire, and then from there, I had my visa was expiring for Angola, so I had a break in my West African experience to fly because I had to fly through Morocco, through to Angola, and then I did Namibia and Botswana as well. Then came back through South Africa to Nigeria, and then continue back Ghana. And then I did a Sao Tome Principe, and then I didn't get a visa in time for Liberia, so I flew from Ghana to Sierra Leone. So I missed Liberia and said, "Oh, I'll get there on my way back." But I traveled from Sierra Leone by road, covered the entire West Africa. So Sierra Leone, went to Guinea-Bissau, through the Casamance, you know, through Senegal, Gambia, Dakar, did Cape Verde, back Mauritania, even Mauritania, that wasn't part of my plan. One of my friends in Hong Kong, she wrote to me. She says everyone they see I'm traveling in Africa, and she said, "Oh, my mom is from Mauritania. My dad's from Mali. My aunt's there. You can stay with my family." Like literally a random message, and I said, "Oh, is there a taxi that takes you there?" And I looked, I saw there's a taxi from Dakar. I went to Mauritania. That wasn't part of the plan, you know. Came back, you know, went to Mali, from there to through Togo again to Benin, and came back to Ghana. So I didn't do Liberia and Niger, but I covered most of West Africa, you know, in that trip. So again, just
Wow.
connecting with local people and, you know, just understanding the culture from their perspective was really, really life changing. Yeah.
And I love just that in that story how a lot of people don't think about traveling through Africa that way.
Hmm.
And the fact that, look, dark skinned, single black woman, and you did
Hmm.
it.
Yes.
and you're here to tell the story. And I think
Absolutely.
that that's what starts to dispel a lot of the myths around the region is
Absolutely. I felt
really, and
comfortable. I felt like
yeah,
everywhere I went, everyone kept saying, my sister, my sister. And I just felt like I was home. Like even in places like Sierra Leone, like a lot of their dialect, like I understood. And they said, oh, you
yeah,
understand what we're saying? And I said, yeah, it's similar to the dialect we have in the Caribbean,
in
So
Caribbean.
I totally
Yeah.
understood, so I felt at home. The food, so a lot of the things that, like the drinks, like the bisop that they, sorrel that we call in the Caribbean, but the same type of food that we're eating, so I really enjoyed my experience there. Totally enjoyed it. And then the fabric, that was another aspect of that trip. So I'll tell you a bit about that and how that got me to what I'm doing now and how I found my passion because of that journey through Africa.
And so that's a perfect segue because we're going to take a break and then we're really going to talk about the brand that you've built as well as sort of the life you've built in Hong Kong that kind of incorporates all these things that we just mentioned. So
Yes.
we'll be back after the break. So we get asked the most random questions here at the Black Expat. Everything from who ships hair care products internationally to where can I find a solid expat tax professional? This is why we're soon launching a new resource called Buy While Abroad. It's a business directory to connect expats and travelers with the companies that deliver the products and services they need while they are abroad. So if you're a business owner and your business can cater to global nomads, especially a diverse clientele, you should visit buywhileabroad.com and share your email address. We will keep you posted when we go live and definitely tell you how you can join. Right. So we're going to pick back up from where the conversation went right before the break. And so obviously Audra just kind of walked us through sort of her travels in Africa. And then, eventually she gets back to Hong Kong. And so I'm curious. So after, you're starting to have all these experiences traveling in Africa, the people you've met, you're obviously still employed as a banker, or maybe you weren't, but I'm thinking like, at least you had a job because you had to explain while you were gone and whatnot. So what was going on with you career wise, actually,
Right.
during that whole period?
Right. So so I took a career break to pursue my MBA full time. So the initial East Africa trip, I was still employed, but when I went back and was traveling in West Africa, I was then working for myself. So I took a career break. I pursued my MBA full time. So I studied full time here in Hong Kong. And again, I saw this random stranger on CNN on African Voices. I reached out to her, and that's what inspired me to book a one-way flight to Ghana. And that's how I ended up spending the summer. I did a summer there for summer internship. And during my trip across Africa, I met a girl in Ghana, and I met her. We were at this beautiful, garden party, and I was chatting with her, and I said, "I really love your dress," and she said, "I own nothing black." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "There's nothing black in my wardrobe. Not a black shoe, not a black purse. There's absolutely nothing black." And then our conversation about our love for color, I started telling her how much I love color. But in banking, like all of my clothes were black or gray or navy. But outside of work, I was always very colorful. That conversation really inspired me. And I thought, why not merge my love of travel and fashion together and create resort wear for people who love color? So that was the initial idea of the brand. And again, I didn't study fashion, but I grew up around it. Like my mom worked in textile, like my aunt, like just, a lot of my family members. And like I said, my grandmother was a seamstress. I've always had tailors in every single country that I've lived in. Like I just felt like it was important for me to adjust things and to tailor make things that I really love. So that's where that inspiration came from. So at that point, I had set up a trading company. I was doing a bit of trading between Asia and Africa. So I didn't go back to banking. So once I was done with my MBA, I just thought, what can I do between Asia and Africa? And that's when I registered my first company, and I was doing a bit of that. And that's what really inspired the initial trip across West Africa. It was, let me go there, meet people on the continent who need someone on the ground in China to help them with sourcing products and, here on the ground. And that's the initial, idea. But then when I met this girl, the idea just changed into following my passion. Like I've always loved fashion. How do I create a brand, based on my ideas? So again, came back to Hong Kong and went into the fabric market here. I just started feeling different fabric, just trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go. And went into China. Someone gave me a contact there, and he said, "Where are you?" I got to the factory, and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from the Caribbean." He said, "I lived in the Caribbean. This is a Hong Kong Chinese guy who was running a factory, and he totally helped me, realize the idea." Like I said to him, I brought some fabric with me. I said, "This is my idea. I'm looking to create a brand that's centered around color." But initially, I wasn't focusing on sustainability. Like I thought, what I wanted to keep the cost down because I was thinking of being able to reach a bit more of my target customers, and I didn't think about all of the fabric and all the different aspect of sustainability, right? But because of my sourcing days, I met a girl. Someone connected me with a girl in South Africa, and they reached out to me and said, "Oh, can you help us source machinery to deal with the textile waste problem in Africa?" So I knew there was a lot of waste because of fast fashion, but I didn't realize how vast it was and how much it affected the African continent. So that totally, shifted my attention. And I felt like, you know what? I've spent a lot of time on the African continent. I stayed with these local family. I felt triggered by it. And I said, how do I make a difference? What can I do to make a difference? And that's why, my brand focused on reducing textile waste and size inclusion.
So you've said a lot, and I think I'm going to follow the thread on quite a few of them.
Okay.
And so here's where let's start with this. So obviously you had a background in banking. You went and got your MBA while living in Hong Kong. Obviously you set up your first business. As someone who's an entrepreneur myself, and I do have an MBA as well.
Right.
And this is not a brag thing. This is just a point of contention. Well, it's like contention. That's a negative point, but this is just a point to be made.
Right.
It's really funny, because I've talked to you offline. I've talked to you earlier. Mm-hmm. Is that even with all of that, right? You coming from a finance background, business degree, all of that, running a business,
yes,
is a completely different animal, right?
Absolutely.
Irrespective, even with all that knowledge, which you're like, y'all can't see because she's nodding her head, like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially as a solopreneur, right? Like I was doing everything by myself, and I felt like I was spinning my wheels. I was doing a lot of research, and, I'll send an invoice and then nothing happens, right? So I'm doing a lot of free research with people, and I realized I needed to change my business model, whether I charge an upfront fee, so I know that they're serious about really sourcing these products, or I need to, figure out another market, figure out, what else can I do to make this more lucrative and be able to get consistent revenue. So that's what I was thinking, why I went back and said, okay, I'll take this break and, kind of figure out what direction I'll go next,
Because here's the thing, because I always talk to folks who are like, I want to start a business. And then because I think also hearing your story, right? They're like, okay, she's in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. She was in finance. She got to travel in Africa. She's been traveling all around the world. She is launching this fashion brand. And there's like a social mission to it with sustainability, looking at textiles and waste. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I already know she's tired because there's so much work. I just know that, because especially when you're doing something new, and in your case, like many companies, but once again, it's different because you're doing it predominantly solo, is you're doing it across continents and across countries.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because it's different when you're doing something in your house, but it's not that you're not doing it in your house, but you're involving folks across time zones and locations and whatnot. And so how has it been? Just obviously you're someone who's a connector, and I haven't used this term a whole lot with you, but you definitely have a whole lot of cross-cultural competency because you're able to communicate with people of different backgrounds. But how is it trying to get this idea off the ground and sort of connecting with folks in different spaces to be able to kind of bring this vision to life?
Right. A lot of people don't realize that, prior to COVID, I spent a lot of my time in China. My friends in Hong Kong would say, are you still living in Hong Kong? Because I was spending so much time there, but I don't speak Mandarin. So I literally use translation apps to speak in English. And the apps, I'll give them the phone and they speak in Chinese and it translates to English. And this is how we communicate. Like at the factory, like the initial factory I was working with, the owner, he spoke English. But then I moved to another factory where they spoke no English at all. I had one girl who was learning English, and I was trying to help her with her homework. That was a whole nother story in the factories, just being there, but, not speaking the language. But I felt like it was necessary for me to be on the ground, for me to feel the fabric, for me to really, give them my vision for the brand and see it come to life. It was important for me to be be there. So I spent a majority of my time there. Especially, I don't know if you remember, we had a protest here in Hong Kong for quite a bit of time. So I had a hard time getting my
we
products.
Saw it. Yeah. We saw it. I was like, you made it say this wasn't as small as that comment made. No, we saw it. Very aware.
Yeah, so that definitely restricted my ability to get products in from China. So I had to cross the border almost every day. It's an hour and a half from my place to the factory. So I literally was crossing back and forth. I was told, oh, maybe because your package contained black or white items and their protest color. I said, I don't have any black items, but literally the customs would just block all my orders coming in. I literally had to go across the border, get my packages, repackage them and ship it out. So it was, like I said, a crazy journey, but I was doing it all by myself. Like literally I built my website. I was doing social media. I'm designing. I'm, dyeing the colors, figuring out every single aspect of the brand. I did it on my own, on my own. I mean, now I have a bit of help, but
girl. So I was gonna say on social media, when people want to talk about hustle culture, and I'm just like, y'all don't know what you're talking about, right? People are like, you should be your own entrepreneur. Right. You can hustle. I'm like, no. Yeah, what you say on social media sounds sexy. What's not sexy is being up at 2 a.m. trying to fight with the website or trying to get a product together. Now this is just me talking about from experience.
Yes.
Right? Because people are like, oh, that looks so amazing. You must have a team. Nah, it's me.
Yes, exactly. You learn so much as well, right? Yeah, you learn so much, especially when you have limited resources. I didn't go back to work. I didn't go back to banking after my MBA, and I went off traveling, right? So, not having that consistent, income coming in, that was a bit, it didn't allow me to hire a lot of people to help with different tasks, right? But now I know the importance of, delegating and, getting other people to help. So obviously I had some interns over the summer, and, I have other people who are, helping me with different aspects of the business. But, for a long time, it was just me dealing with doing pop-ups and, just the whole customer experience, because that's one of the parts that I really enjoy, like getting the feedback from the customers and being able to serve those customers. So like I said, I wore so many different hats, but I enjoyed every single aspect of the business. Like there wasn't anything that I hated to do. Like, I really enjoyed what I was doing. And I felt like this is my calling, right? Because especially I think my motivation behind the brand, when I learned about how much waste is dumped there in Africa, because I love the continent so much, and I said I have to do something about it. So I've decided, so the brand is focused on, it's centered around color, but it's size and height inclusive. You come across brands that are size inclusive, but you don't find too many brands that are size and height inclusive. So I do petite for someone 5 feet, short is 5'4", regular is 5'8", and tall is 6 feet. And if you're in between, I can customize the sizes as well, right? Because I want women of all sizes to feel confident in color, but most importantly, the pieces are adjustable. So, they will last for a long time. So instead of, designing where the premise is to design to keep the pieces out of the landfill. So for it to last in your wardrobe as long as possible. So you're not just, having waste, so this was the idea behind the brand. So I got traction really, really quickly. I got selected for New York Fashion Week. Then I showcased in Ghana, for Fashion Connect Africa. That was for the year of return. Came back to Hong Kong, and then COVID hit. And then that changed everything.
So because I don't want to get off this point, because this is a very big piece to the work that you're doing. For folks who don't know, because there are folks who probably are hearing you saying in terms about textile waste, particularly in Africa, can you kind of walk through a little bit what's been happening traditionally, or at least what is currently happening?
Yes. So there's a lot of people don't realize. You think that you donate your clothing and it goes to people who need it, but a lot of people don't realize, like, a lot of the clothing you donate, or even clothing that's overproduction that's done by whether it's fast fashion brands or just brands in general that's just overproducing, this clothes gets sold in bales, and most of it end up in the landfills of Africa. So it's a huge problem, like a huge, huge problem. Ghana has one of the largest, secondhand, trading market, Continental, I think it's called, where, a lot of people don't realize, like, there's, a lot of narrative around, zero waste, right? But for me, when you're designing with no seam allowance because it's zero waste, I find it's zero waste because it's saving the brand money, right? You're not wasting the fabric, right? But if you design with extra seam allowance, those pieces, if you gain weight, you can open it. Now, well, I haven't announced yet, but all of our new skirts before, like I have, mommy and me. So the kids' pieces I designed with adjustable elastic. I don't know if you're familiar with the ones with the buttonholes. So as the kids grow, you will open. So now that's a new offer that we have for adults as well. So whether you're in between size or you gain or lose weight, you can actually just open the elastic and pull it, and then, button the elastic. And also sometimes you're wearing flats or you're wearing, heels. You want the skirt to fall higher or lower. So having that adjustable elastic gives you the ability to adjust the sizes. And that's one of the things that I customize. Again, this is not something that I've invented. It's been around for a long time, but brands want you to overconsume. And my message is to buy less, buy better quality, buy products that are made for you. And that's why I mostly do made to order. So within 2 weeks, I can make your size and your length. So you choose the colors that work for your skin tone, what length you prefer, whether you want a mini, a midi, a maxi, whatever works for you. And within 2 weeks, I can produce your size. So this is my mission, to reduce waste and to keep the pieces out of the landfills. So.
And here's the thing, like what you're saying resonates with me, just seeing how we used to buy clothes in Cameroon, right? And I'm sure in the Caribbean, I mean, you had the grandmother who was a seamstress, this is why tailors are amazing, right? Because you go, they get you what you want is what they create.
Exactly.
And it is made to order, and it is what it is. And it's really awesome because I feel like you're really incorporating that experience. But also you're right. Like there's nothing worse than buying a piece. You look good in it, you feel good in it. And then either through your body changes or quite frankly, the way it gets washed and handled, and all of a sudden you can't fit into it anymore. It's sort of like, and then you've lost that piece. Cause I'm thinking of something right now that's hanging in my closet where it got washed a certain way. And now it's like, well, it was good for those couple of wears, but now I can't fit into it.
Exactly.
My weight did not change. I would like to say that point. My weight did not change. It was the washing cycle.
Right. No, I totally understand. But even like I said, coming out of COVID, right? So many people have lost and gained weight. Like, so again, so instead of you having to discard the pieces and get new clothing, you have a piece that you can just adjust it, and it lasts for a long time. So I feel like, there's so much, narrative around, like the text, the fabric and all that stuff. Like I said, one of the mission for the brand is to create clothing that evokes joy, but also to divert it from the landfills of Africa, right? So obviously, with the brighter colors, there isn't any natural dye yet that will dye the pieces that doesn't bleed, right? So, there isn't, but what I do is that the prints are done by digital printing. So that's less water and energy waste by doing digital printing. But, having the piece lasting for a long time in a specific person's wardrobe, or something that evokes joy where you don't want to just discard it, that's one way of reducing the waste and keeping the pieces out of the landfill. So I feel like there's so many people who are have their own interpretation of sustainability, but again it's important for us to address the problem, and the problem is overconsumption and making pieces adjustable just so that it will last for a long time and you avoid them going into the landfill. So this is my mission, and I am really grateful that I am working on it. And like I said, I'm still researching other options in terms of getting the brighter colors, to be dyed, naturally, or, obviously, a solution. There isn't anything, obviously, like, using trees and like all these different things that are used for natural dyes. You just don't have anything, right? So I came across a company recently that's doing like some sort of digital way of printing on colors. So I literally just reached out to the CEO saying, okay, can we discuss what this entails? So again, I'm still finding a solution, but it's important for people to start where you are. I feel like a lot of emerging designers get discouraged because you have a lot of people who will nitpick, say, oh, it's not sustainable because of this or because of that. But I am solving a specific problem. And the problem is keeping the pieces out of the landfill and having those pieces, last for a longer time. So that's where I'm starting. And like I said, if fast fashion brand can win sustainability awards, we need to, encourage other emerging designers to start where they are and, to do the things that they they think is necessary to, care for the planet. So we're taking small steps. So, yeah.
I think you highlighted obviously some of the challenges you have faced in terms of, obviously there was the geopolitical situation that was going
Mm-hmm.
on, and then obviously COVID, which we're still trying to really kind of emerge from, and then even developing a product that is safe for the environment and is
Mm-hmm.
also just
Mm-hmm.
sustainable in terms of when we look at
Right.
resources.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, you're essentially, I mean, not essentially, you are a full-time entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so I always like to have a little bit of that for those who come from that background, for the people who are listening in, then
Mm-hmm.
how have you been able, like, obviously because you left your job in banking, right? So,
Yes.
so has it just been, look, Audra has hustled and sold and consulted and coached or got
Right.
grants. How have you been able
Uh-huh.
to sort of sustain, especially honestly during COVID, which everything just kind of
Yes.
stopped? Yeah.
Yes. So one of the things that I haven't mentioned is that during COVID, I lost everything. Like I had to
Mhm.
start from zero. I had used a new factory right before COVID, and because I was traveling, I had like a large order that needed to be done. I bought 800 meters of fabric, 500 meters I left with them, and again, a lot of the factories were closed and all of that stuff. But I kept in touch with them the entire time. And then when things started getting back to normal in Hong Kong, we had, zero new cases for like 30 days. And, so at that point, I thought, let's resume operation because I wasn't really worried because I don't have a lot of inventory. The business model is not to keep inventory. It's to have a few pieces of samples and then I will make to order. So for years, prior to COVID, obviously I launched the brand in 2018. I've been saying this for a long time, like you're producing too much. This is a problem, right? And so even your favorite, charity brands that's using recycled fabric, like when COVID hit, I'm getting emails that, oh, we're discounting our inventory. Again, I didn't have that problem. So I felt like, let's just wait. And then when things and then customers started reaching out, oh, we're moving. We would love to get some colorful clothing before we go. Like, so these are the things that made me realize like I have to keep going because customers are now reaching out. And as long as I have fabric on hand, I can produce, right? And then that's when I learned that the factory had stolen all of my fabric, like everything, like 500 meters of it all gone. But because I was so determined, because I'm so passionate about what I do, like giving up wasn't an option. Like literally, like I rented out my bedrooms. I'm just like, how do I keep my head above water and to be able to have enough runway to keep going? So that's literally like I was reducing expenses, whatever. Like I have, a friend, I got a small contract, doing some compliance work. So again, so whatever it took to at least give me a little bit of income while I work on rebuilding the brand, that's what I did. So I'm now at the point now where I do have fabric on hand now. I face some challenges with production because a lot of the small factories closed down. Once a lot of the international orders started, canceling, a lot of them couldn't pay their workers. A lot of the small factories closed down. So now I've hired, someone to help with sewing at the sample room so that I can continue with the same model of doing pre-orders versus having a lot of mass producing, right? So that's been, like I said, it's been a challenging journey, but I definitely felt like I wouldn't change anything. Like obviously I wish that my fabric wasn't stolen, but I learned a lot from it and I leveraged my network to be able to get started again. And again, the borders are still closed between Hong Kong and China, so it would have been much easier for me to go back in and be able to find new factories and all that stuff. But I literally did everything by leveraging my network and reaching out to the people who I know who are on the ground. And I've been fortunate enough to have people there who are really helping me along the way. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you for being transparent because I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's difficult for folks to actually share, okay, this is the really rough stuff that's been
Yes.
going on. And I knew that you had faced some really interesting challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we kind of sort of wrap up here, one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
am curious about is that obviously you are a traveler, you live in the States, you lived in the Caribbean, you're now in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Is for you right now Hong Kong the place you see yourself being for a minute? Or, and I'm saying a minute because you've already been there a decade, and
Yes.
right? Or do you see yourself, heading out to somewhere different in the next couple of
Right.
years?
So I am still in love with Hong Kong. I am also in love with the African continent. I definitely think Hong Kong is still my place, and especially with my business, I need to be close to China. I need to be able to, keep things going and be able to realize this vision, right? But in a few years, my goal is to split my time between Hong Kong and a few places I love in Africa. So, so I'm definitely, taking steps towards that. But I don't see myself moving back to the US ever. Like I keep saying that, but I really love Hong Kong. And, from here, I would think, splitting my time between a few places I really love. Like I love Ghana. Namibia is one of those countries that I really love, as well, based on the people I met there and just my experience as well. So there are so many places, Gambia as well, that I really, really love. So there are places I would love to split my time between on the continent. And then, like I said, I have another half of the continent to explore as well. So this is my plan in terms of, when I don't think I'll ever leave Hong Kong. Like, I think this is my place. It probably will always be a hub for me. But I will definitely spend more time on the continent in the few years.
I figured you would eventually probably get a house somewhere on the,
Yes.
on the continent.
Absolutely.
Your love for it is definitely infectious and contagious. But
It is.
oh my goodness, thank you so much for making this happen. I know that we went back and forth, but I like see, because people can't see right now. I'm like, I should describe. She's got a beautiful bright dress on, which is clearly indicative of the work that she's doing. So I'm like, she's selling the dress and she's just sitting down. But I appreciate you just coming on and telling a little bit about your story, because I think that your brand is obviously amazing now, but I think it's going to be really amazing as you go forward.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. And thanks for the work that you're doing to showcase Black expats around the world.
I'm trying. Well, if I hit every single one, I guess that would be millions of people. Right, but anyway, so we will have, as we do with everyone else, we will have Audra's information available in the show notes, as well as on the Black Expat website. She has got a great offer, which if you tap into our newsletter, you can definitely see the information. I may put it on the website, but I know for sure it'll be in the newsletter. So make sure you sign up for that. But until next time, thank you for listening to the Global Chatter.
Thank you.
You just heard an episode of the Global Chatter podcast, a project by the Black Expat. It's hosted by me, Amanda Bates, and it's edited by Stephanie Fuccio. To learn more about this podcast or to learn more about the Black Expat, visit theblackexpat.com.